I'm going to introduce my colleagues on the panel very briefly. I'm Gastanaga. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Virginia, and reforming our criminal justice system with a particular focus on restoring racial justice to the system is one of our key priorities that we'll be working on for the next 5 years. And thank you for being here, Mr. Hill. I'm always so grateful for people who choose to come and be with us, and particularly for Oliver Hill, whose father was a really important part of the evolution of civil rights in this country. And I'm glad to see all of you here. Let me introduce on my far right, which is probably the right thing. No, Adam Bates is from the Cato Institute. Started out in Oklahoma and played football at the University of Miami, and graduated from Michigan Law School, and also has a graduate degree in Middle Eastern Studies. He will gladly give you a copy of a Cato Institute Constitution that is both in English and Arabic.
Very handy to take with the airport with you.
Yeah.
And the bag.
And Adam runs the Cato Institute's Police Misconduct website and blog, and is well regarded nationally as an expert on police practices, the good, the bad, and the need to change. Phillip Thompson, you can read in your bio, is the president of the Loudoun County branch of the NAACP here in Virginia. Also serves as the Virginia State Conference's criminal justice chair, and he is a lawyer in private practice. He has been an officer and in the Judge Advocate Corps, in the Marine Corps, worked in the Navy General Counsel's office. We should talk about that NCIS Law Enforcement Information Exchange Network at some point. He graduated from Washington University School of Law and the Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. Practices Native American law, civil rights, employment law, and I'm really excited to have both these guys on this panel because I think that this is going to be a very interesting panel. I hope we'll have a lot of time for a good discussion. We thought we'd start with Adam kind of setting the tone and kind of national framework for this conversation. What's happened in terms of militarization of our police subsequent to 9/11, a little bit about the federal programs, and I'll be sort of chiming in to talk about how what he's talking about relates to what's happened in Virginia where appropriate, and Phillip is going to be giving his perspective about how it feels to be on the ground in a locality as doing the kind of work that he's doing in terms of what militarization of police means in our everyday lives, and also sharing some perspective based on his role both as a law enforcer in the military and as a military person. So, Adam.
All right, so if you guys were here earlier this morning, you heard Dr. Reed speak a little bit about how this is not, I mean, when we talk about especially the militarization of the police, we have to go, we can't really start at 9/11. This is something that has been going on for decades, and 9/11 added some new wrinkles to it and accelerated it. But if we want to talk about the militarization of police, we really have to go back at least 50 years. Really around the time of the unrest in Watts in 1965, and then some of you may be familiar with the Charles Whitman shooting at the University of Texas in 1966, when he climbed to the top of the clock tower on campus and shot dozens of people. That's kind of the genesis of this attitude, of this proliferation of the attitude among law enforcement that cops need the ability to respond to emergencies, to violent emergencies, to active shooters, hostage situations, riots, things like that. So that's where we start to see the proliferation of what will become what we all know as the SWAT team. We can disagree about whether that's a persuasive argument, but you can at least see that there's an argument there. There's something to say that the police need the ability to respond to emergencies like that. As Dr. Reed spoke of this morning, where we really see this start to accelerate is the advent of the war on drugs. So what had become a police force for special circumstances, that's what the S stands for, things like hostage situations, barricaded suspects, started to become a more routine use of law enforcement. So if we can get a little Socratic, I'd like to ask how many how many SWAT raids, so this is SWAT teams, paramilitary gear, body armor, assault rifles, how many times do SWAT raids go kicking in people's doors in this country every year? Does anybody have a guess? And we can only guess because we don't really know the answer, but we have some good guesses. I'll say, as a little hint, in the early 80s, this was about 2,000 to 3,000 a year nationwide. Sir?
I'll hazard a guess, 15,000.
You're way short. Right. The best estimates we have are between 60 and 80,000 SWAT raids a year in this country. And that data, that's out of date. We don't have good data on this. There are 18,000 different law enforcement agencies in this country, and there's no force, forcing them to turn over this data. So we don't really know. But it's estimated about 60 to 80,000. The vast majority of these SWAT raid deployments now are not hostage situations and not active shooters. They're search warrants. And the vast majority of these search warrants are looking for drugs. When we talk about militarizing the police, we can't just talk about post 9/11. We have to talk about the war on drugs. The war on drugs was the war on terror. But before there was the war on terror, that became the thing that everybody, every government official, every police official, anytime you wanted to expand the size and scope of what the government was doing, drugs. And Dr. Reed, I don't want to just retread his presentation. You saw the data that shows what the impact of the war on drugs on our liberties, and especially on communities of color. Obviously, we have to talk about then 9/11 happens, and now we have another prong. We have a justification prong for this, the expansion of government. So when you start to go through these federal grant programs, federal equipment transfer programs, you'll often see it'll either be drugs or terrorism. It'll come from Homeland Security. It will come from the Office of National Drug Control Policy. But one of those two excuses are being used to justify these programs. So to say where we are now, a White House task force commissioned by President Obama, pursuant to an executive order, President Obama has occasionally highlighted criminal justice and police militarization issues. This especially came up after Ferguson. So Michael Brown is killed by a police officer in Ferguson. It leads to unrest and the subsequent failure to charge the officer involved. So when the Department of Justice went into Ferguson to see what was going on in Ferguson, not just to assess whether to file civil rights charges against the officer, but also just to assess the patterns and practices of the police department, what they found was a police department that was preying on its community. It was predatory police tactics as far as things like civil asset forfeiture, things like what we call contempt of cop violations, or people whose charge sheets have nothing on it but resisting arrest, for instance. If you've ever seen somebody whose only charge against them is resisting arrest, you may wonder how that can come to be. Typically, that's something where in otherwise normal interaction with the police escalates. Often that police provocation ends with the person being arrested, and the only charge they can come up with is resisting arrest because the person wasn't doing anything wrong in the first place. But so, in light of this renewed discussion on both sides of the aisle, left, right, the Republican, Democrat, certainly Libertarian, on criminal justice and police practices, there was this task force by the White House, and they found that from 2009 to 2014, the federal government transferred $18 billion in cash or equipment to state and local law enforcement. So we're talking about cash in terms of drug enforcement grants through, there is a laundry list of these programs. I'm just going to sit here and spew initials at you, but the high-intensity drug trafficking areas is an initiative of the NAACP that gives a lot of federal money to law enforcement to prosecute the drug war. There are grant programs like the Urban Area Security Initiative that are run through Department of Homeland Security that is for terrorism grants. But the long and short of it is there are billions of dollars out there for state and local law enforcement to come to the federal government and say, we have a terrorism problem, we have a drug problem, we want a lot of money, we want guns, we want tracked armored vehicles, we want grenade launchers, and for many, many years, the federal government was very happy to oblige. President Obama highlighted this as something that he thought was a problem and commissioned a working group to try and get a handle on this issue. What actually became his policy didn't go nearly as far as the working group had suggested, or people like my organization, Cato, and the ACLU had suggested. But he has highlighted this as a problem. And just a few examples, I think, instead of just quoting numbers at you. You may have heard of the Department of Defense 1033 program, right? That's probably the most common one that people have heard of. The 1033 program is a program that just transfers military surplus or obsolete military equipment from the Department of Defense to your local police department. That can be things like office chairs and desks. It can be things like high-powered rifles and armored vehicles. When you apply for a 1033 grant or for an urban area security grant, you have to give a reason. You have to give a reason why you're getting the equipment. So a couple examples. Anybody from New Hampshire? No. So the Keene, New Hampshire apparently has a huge pumpkin festival every year, and apparently it is the biggest, grandest pumpkin festival in all the world. And I have no reason to dispute that. I've seen pictures of it. It's the coolest pumpkin festival I've ever seen. But the Keene, New Hampshire Police Department applied for a Bearcat, which is a tracked, mine-resistant, armored vehicle made to withstand IED blasts from roadside bombs in Iraq. And on their application, the Keene, New Hampshire Police Department said that the Keene Pumpkin Festival was a potential target for Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks. Their application was accepted, and they were given $285,000 in change so they could procure this vehicle. When asked about this, one of their city council members, this will be important to a point I come back to later, one of their city council members said this is a total waste of money. The important thing to keep in mind, though, here is it wasn't their money. This was federal. This was your money. If you were paying your federal taxes, this was your money. This was not Keene, New Hampshire's money. So we'll come back to that in a second. Another city councilman in Keene, in a rare fit of candor from our legislators, said, well, it's not really a terrorist target. That's just what we have to put on the form if we want the thing. Which is, of course it is. That is people responding to incentives. And then this is a quote. What red-blooded American cop would not want to drive around in one of those? And again, I can't say that's not true. I get what he's saying, but that's not what law enforcement is for. That's not what this equipment is for. But that's just a little into the mindset of this militarizing police force. Another example is Tacoma, Washington. They similarly got a mine-resistant armored personnel vehicle, or MRAP, that is, again, designed to take mine blasts and IED explosions. They also have a tendency to tip over. The actual soldiers in the military don't really like these. In their estimation, the protection from explosions, is worth it, right? It is worth the risk of tipping over. They're very top heavy. They're raised off the ground. When you are a police officer in American streets, the risk of running over an IED is essentially zero. The risk of tipping over or tearing up the road is much greater than zero. But the Tacoma, Washington, in their application for this vehicle said, we are worried about IED blasts. This is Tacoma, Washington. To the best of my ability as a researcher, I can never find evidence that there's been a single IED blast in Tacoma, Washington before or after. But again, it's the same thing. The federal government puts this money out there, puts this equipment out there, and says, you come to us and you say terrorism, you come to us and you say drugs, we'll give it to you. We got all this stuff just laying around.
Can I add one other thing about
Sure.
the Series 3 program that people need to know? It's really a way to mothball military equipment until it's needed again. Because the conditions of the grant say, we're going to send you the Bearcat. You're going to pay to keep it up. You're going to keep it functioning. You're required to use it once a year at minimum. And if we need it back, you have to send it back.
Yeah, but they
So
give away so much.
I know. I mean, it's essentially, we have this ongoing war. We're not confident we won't need this, quote, surplus equipment again in some theater, but we don't want to have to store it all in some big warehouse somewhere. So we're going to give it to all these local governments who have this serious IEP problem. I think they're really concerned about NAACP and the pumpkins.
Let me raise your hand if you've been through an IED blast in battlefield. I've been through one, well, more than one, and the Bearcat isn't going to stop that. Okay, I'm here to tell you. I've seen an M1 tank flipped upside down. I've seen Amtraks demolished. So it's not going to stop. It's kind of a misnomer. But go ahead.
I don't even want to get into
on the
yeah,
assessment
the
side.
military has a penchant for overstating the need of some of this equipment too. This is not just
No, they needed it, but it doesn't work. You think our problem with the military is we always think that everybody else is an idiot. So we'll build this thing to withstand the blast. So what do? They make bigger blasts.
Right.
and one of the things that comes up a lot is especially the 1 year requirement. So under the 1033 program, somewhat perversely, if you get weapons or vehicles from the federal government, you are required to put those into use within a year. Now, as far as I know, there's some, there's room for debate about what put into use means, but it certainly seems to be encouraging police to play with their toys, not just to keep them stored away for a rainy day or the emergency, but we actually have to take this thing out and use it, or the Pentagon's going to take it back. I should say, I don't just, Cato, we're often accused of being anti-cop, so just the cops alone, there is resistance to this among police officers in the U.S., especially in light of Ferguson. During Ferguson, you saw the array of military equipment, of people not observing proper. So there are very lax training requirements and instruction requirements with this equipment. So it's not just transferring military weapons and equipment to police officers, it's also not really training them up, A, on how to use it, B, on how being on the streets in St. Louis may be different from being on the streets of Baghdad as far as civil liberties, constitutional rights. Question?
I have a question and a statement. The question is, how come we have so much stuff that we're shipping, we're actually selling to other countries, and we're giving away to our police force?
The gentleman who lives in Loudoun County can probably tell you.
Now,
that.
What else does this country make besides military equipment?
There you go.
Well, we used to make cars.
Used to
do a lot of
do a lot of
Now we're
things.
going to make small forts and
We make weapons now. That's what we do.
But that was the question, and the comment is, how well did that show of force in Ferguson save the businesses that were burned, looted, what have you? Big force, big show, no action.
We can have a discussion about that later. I'm from St. Louis. I grew up not far from Ferguson. I'm a member of the Missouri Bar. Family there. I was at the second riot because lawyers were there observing, trying to get people out of jail. We can talk about that later. That was a policy to let. If you see the businesses got burned down,
Yes.
Right across the street is Emerson Electric, one of the biggest electric companies in the world. Emerson didn't get touched. Across the street, minority businesses burned. So that's all policy.
Did you mention Loudoun?
Yeah, I live in Loudoun County. Yes.
I used to. I'm a transplant.
It's the same.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a transplant.
So let's get back and let Adam finish what he wants
Sure.
to talk about, and I think Phillip wants to talk a little bit about the software that should go along with the hardware that's not happening.
So back to the idea that this is not just libertarians and the liberals and the ACLU and Cato complaining about this. The police chief of Burlington, Vermont, after Ferguson, this is a picture from Ferguson. I love this picture, and I want to talk about some elements of it a little later. But the police chief of Burlington, Vermont, withdrew his office from the 1033 program, withdrew from the federal funding program. And when they asked him about it, he said, his name is Brandon Del Pozo. He said, I watched Ferguson like everyone else, and that is not police work. That is not what I want my police to be. That is not what I want my community to think of our police. When they get this equipment, they start thinking through a military lens, and that's not law enforcement. So this is not just us saying this. There are police departments around the country doing things the right way, and they should be promoted for that. It's great when the police become facilitators of this reform instead of obstacles to it, which is too often the case. But a few more specific examples of. It's not just guns. It's not just guns and tanks, although that's what people tend to think of because those are most visible. It's also surveillance equipment. So one of the issues I work on at Cato is something called Stingray surveillance. Has anybody in here heard of this? Is an ACLU audience. So a Stingray is a surveillance device. It's a cell phone surveillance device. It's it's man-portable. It's about the size of a, we don't have any electronic equipment that's this big anymore, so I don't know what the
a big router.
Right, a big, yeah.
Yeah.
So the way this Stingray operates, your cell phone is designed automatically to connect to whichever cell tower is sending in the strongest signal at any given time. This happens dozens of times throughout the day as you go about your business. Your cell phone is disconnecting and reconnecting to cell towers. What the Stingray does, it sends out a boosted cell signal that muscles the legitimate cell signals out and forces your phone to connect to the Stingray device. Once your phone is connected, the person operating the Stingray, who's a police officer, can rip subscriber information from your phone. We don't know, because there's trap secrecy around this device, whether they can get content, like the actual content of your phone conversations. I would say they can. They can also, in the primary use of this device, at least according to law enforcement, is that they can also physically track your location to within a few feet by pinging your device and following you around and triangulating your position from the Stingray device. So around the country, I think the ACLU currently has found that police in 23 states and the District of Columbia are using these Stingray devices. The other 27 states are not using Stingray devices. We just haven't been able to prove that they're using them yet. I would suspect that at least one police department in every state in this union has a Stingray device. Even more perverse than what I've already said about this is, so this was an intelligence and military device. It was used overseas. It was used in the drug war in Central and South America. As they tend to do, it became a domestic law enforcement device. When Harris Corporation, which is a Florida company that manufactures these devices, wanted to start licensing the hardware to state and local police departments instead of just federal agencies, in coordination with the federal government, they got a rule that says in order to procure a Stingray device, state and local police have to coordinate their use of the device with the FBI. In furtherance of that relationship, the FBI produced what they're calling a non-disclosure agreement around the use of the device. And the terms of this non-disclosure agreement are pretty shocking. And we know them thanks to ACLU freedom of information litigation in places like New York. But basically what the non-disclosure agreement says is, if you are using one of these Stingray devices, you are not allowed to disclose any element of it. Even the fact that you have it, the fact that it's used to collect evidence, the functionality of the device. And when we say you're not allowed to disclose it, we don't just mean publicly, we mean not to courts, not to judges, not to lawyers, not to defendants in criminal cases. And in the event that you are in a criminal prosecution where evidence from a Stingray device is used, and there's a chance that the nature of the Stingray surveillance could be disclosed to the court, you are obligated to contact the FBI, and if the FBI wants, they can make you throw the case. They can make you withdraw the evidence, they can make you drop the entire prosecution. And this is not theoretical, this has happened. This has happened in places like Tallahassee, Florida, and Baltimore, where actual prosecutions of seemingly violent crimes, people suspected of violent crimes, who were caught dead to rights, basically, through the use of Stingray equipment, these prosecutions failed because vigilant defense attorneys thought, wait a minute, how did you actually find my client? And once that question comes out, the police officer or the detective says, well, we can't talk about that, it's a national security issue, something of that nature. And the evidence is withdrawn, sweetheart plea deal to the defendant, and then everybody goes home and we pretend none of this ever happened. Another byproduct of that non-disclosure agreement is, in most cases, police are not trying to get warrants. In some cases, they're getting a court order that has a much lower standard called a pen register or a trap and trace order. That basically, those are terms from telegraph machines. To give you a little example of how antiquated our jurisprudence is on this issue. But basically, pen registers would tell you incoming, pen registers and trap and trace orders would tell you incoming and outgoing phone numbers. That's all it would tell you. It wasn't reading your emails, it wasn't tracking your location, it was just numbers. So in some cases, police are filing for pen trap orders, and then they're using the Stingray as if that's what the judge authorized, but the judge didn't know that. Or they're simply doing it on their own initiative. They're just taking the Stingray and they're going and they're doing surveillance and they're not telling anyone about it. And again, because they drop these cases, because they don't disclose this to courts, we don't have a whole lot of case law on this. It's getting better now. Over the last few years, as a result of a lot of civil liberty activism, and litigation, we're starting to get some case law now that says, wait a minute, we need a warrant requirement. We need not just a warrant requirement, but maybe we need to start rethinking our understanding of Fourth Amendment privacy concerns.
I think it's important to point out, I mean, we established a principle a long time ago that you have associational rights, which mean that the ACLU or the NAACP doesn't have to disclose the name of its members to anybody. But if you want to know who the members are of the local AA group, or the ACLU when it meets, or the NAACP when it meets, you just go sit outside with the Stingray and you get everybody's cell numbers, and then you go down and the phone company happily tells you who all those people are who are associated with those cell numbers. And so you lose all that supposed protection about the membership of your organization or your ability to be free to associate with people without the government knowing exactly who they are.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to point out in Virginia, two things. One, the litigation that's going on in Baltimore recently had the result that a picture of Stingray use in Baltimore, because Baltimore become surveillance city USA, and in addition to the aerial surveillance they were doing comprehensive, massive Stingray surveillance. And one of the exhibits in one of the lawsuits is a map of Baltimore that shows conclusively that this has always been the case, that communities of color are under greater surveillance than people who are not in communities of color. The Baltimore map is absolutely color drawn. I mean, they have everywhere the surveillance was almost exclusively a place that was a community of color. In Virginia, we have gotten a state law passed that says that our police have to have a warrant to use a Stingray because we have a warrant requirement for real-time cell phone tracking information. Our warrant requirement isn't as strong as it should be because some people tinkered with the language, and so it's somewhere between an administrative order, trap and trace, and a true criminal warrant, and we need to work on that. But at least we've managed to push a little bit back against the idea that police should be able freely to use this kind of technology without any limitation at all.
So we've got these kind of Supreme Court precedents that at the time they were issued made sense, but now in light of our technological development, they don't really make sense and they're kind of in conflict. So the case that you mentioned was the NAACP versus Alabama, which was the state of Alabama wanted to force the NAACP to turn over its membership lists. The NAACP sued and said this is a violation of our First Amendment associational rights. You can't make us do this. And the Supreme Court agreed. We also have this doctrine called the reasonable expectation of privacy and the third-party test that's in. This is under the Fourth Amendment that says any information that you voluntarily give to third parties, you lose your expectation of privacy in that information. So you can kind of start to see where my cell phone right now is, as it sits here, is beaming information to third parties. And the government's argument is, as a result of the signals my cell phone is voluntarily conveying to the world, I don't have an expectation of privacy in what my cell phone is sending out. The NAACP, our pushback is, wait a minute, how is this different? How is it different? Rather than forcing a local mosque to turn over to the government everyone who attends that mosque, why is it different for them to sit out in front with a Stingray and get everyone's cell phone number? Or why is it different for police to put automated license plate readers? You may have seen these on the back of police cars. They're cameras that go diagonally off the back of the police car. That is recording every single license plate that drives past it to check for warrants, to check for compliance with whatever regulations, but it's also tracking your location. Inevitably, it's tracking your location. I think King Cuccinelli, right, in Virginia, actually had a good response.
We have something in Virginia called the Government Data Collection and Dissemination Practices Act. And it was passed some number of years ago. It was the brainchild of a guy who's now Congressman Morgan Griffith. And Morgan was concerned about stories he was reading about they're putting cameras up on the Virginia Beach boardwalk that would have facial recognition and run 24/7 and be able to document the presence of people, enjoying themselves at the beach. And he thought that our old ideas that you don't have an expectation of privacy anytime you're in public, a little, sort of antiquated and didn't make a lot of sense in this new technological world. So passed this law that, among other, that says quite specifically that for government to collect information about you that's personally identifiable in any form, the government has to have a need that is expressed in advance. So they have to articulate a need for the information, and it has to collect the information in relationship to that need. And he wrote an opinion to the state police, who had at the time 8 million pictures of people's license plates. He wrote an opinion and said, you can't do passive surveillance with license plate pictures because you don't have an express need in advance for collecting that personally identifiable information. And the state police, as a consequence of that, destroyed the files and moved to they do collect it, but they destroy it after 24 hours after they've checked it against the active ones and warrants. And that was a good thing, because among the license plate pictures they had was every car that crossed the River Bridge on the first Obama inaugural day, every car that was present in the Sarah Palin rally in Prince William, that kind of documentation, which we call the just in case, just because kind of surveillance, that we're going to do it just because we can, and we're going to do it just in case. And I don't really have a problem with them tracking the cars that go across the bridge on the day of, but when there isn't an incident, then those ought to all go away, because they're no longer needed to investigate a crime, that occurred. That didn't happen. But the sort of Prince William County has ALPRs on poles on 95 that take a picture of every car that goes down I-95 every day, all day long, and they keep it for, I think Prince William maybe a 6-month or 1-year group. We're suing Fairfax County right now over their policy of collecting data passively with ALPRs, and they keep it for a year. And we're using the state statute, and they're arguing that license plates aren't personally identifiable.
Tell that to the DMV.
Well,
Yeah,
their point is we just get the number, and until we match to the DMV, it's not personally identifiable. And so Social Security numbers aren't personally identifiable? No. So the judge looked at them and said, well, if it wasn't personally identifiable, why would you collect it? Right? What's the point? So we worked on a piece of legislation that kind of would have been a compromise, where we let them get it, but they had to get rid of it in 7 days, and they wouldn't buy into the compromise. So I said, fine, our best alternative to a negotiated agreement in legislation is we'll sue you, and then we'll establish that you have no right to the information at all, and then we could talk again about whether you can compromise.
Maybe, hopefully.
But that case is going to go to trial the week after. Well, it's currently pending on motions for summary judgment, so we could find out that we win or lose on summary judgment. But if we don't, if there isn't a resolution on summary judgment, there'll be a trial the week after Thanksgiving on that issue. But these are the police say, and they want to talk always when we talk about these things about all the what I call the hero stories, which is we had this one license plate that we got this way, and it resulted in this one time something happened that was really good. And they want to use that to justify this massive accumulation of information about all of us, which, given that all of it, and that's why I'm talking about a little bit about links, which is this law enforcement information exchange network, which Northrop Grumman runs, which NCIS started, that accumulates data from all the Virginia police agencies and Metropolitan Council of Governments agencies as their own network, and including that is license plate data that's being uploaded into these cross-jurisdictional databases. And pretty soon they're all going to know more about where you are Tuesday at noon than you know that you have that kind of habit. So those are important things.
So they're camera operated intersections.
The red light cameras, there's specific statute in Virginia that is very strictly written that talks about what they can use that red light camera information for, and it's specifically to enforce specifically enumerated moving violations. David Bulova, who's a Northern Virginia delegate from Fairfax, tried to change the law to say that they could use it in any criminal investigation, and fortunately the legislature didn't think that was a good idea, because the number of libertarians in the legislature, the progressives seemed to think it was fine, but the libertarians and conservatives fought back against it, and it didn't happen. So, but it's going to come back again, because people watch Person of Interest, and they really want to have that kind of thing.
That's kind of, I need to wrap up real fast. But so the point of talking about Stingray and privacy, in addition to things like high-powered rifles and this military equipment, this applies across the board. This is a question of incentives, and this material, the equipment, the strategy, the technology, the incentives are not in place to keep that to just stay as a military device, to stay as an intelligence device, and not filter down into law enforcement. And I think it's a question of changing incentives. We haven't talked about civil asset forfeiture and how police are funding this. I'm happy to get into that in question and answer. But when I look at this picture, one of the things that always stands out to me is this is Ferguson, Missouri. Okay, this is not Cambodia. Really? So these officers are wearing camouflage, but this is not camouflage, right? This is not camouflage to help them blend into their environment. This is camouflage to intimidate the person they're looking at. Because that camouflage does not say I'm a police officer, and it does not say I'm blending in my environment. It says you need to be afraid of me. You'll do what I say right now, or I will kill you. So this, I think this is a very. I love the thing on the mailbox. I love it. One of the problems we have is most of at least people like me, middle class white people from the Bible Belt. This is not our experience with the police, and this is one of our biggest hurdles to reform here. Is that the people who are having this experience and the people who know about this are not the people that have the political capital to do something here. So I think everyone should see this. I think people in this room, this is something you need to talk to your friends and family and neighbors about, because that's the only way this changes. And so I'm happy to answer any questions when we get there. But
that's a massive segue into all this nonsense. You hear all this mess about heroin problem. Look, if you want to find out what's going to happen to you and everybody else in this country, pay attention to what's going on in the minority community. Yeah. When you talk about militarization of the police, or even phone tapping, growing up, and you guys can ask your parents, the standard joke among African Americans, I'm 54, among African American kids, we're talking on the phone about something, and you better watch out, the man is listening in on us. Yep. So when white people all of a sudden found out that the man might be listening in on them, we looked around like, you mean he wasn't?
No, but he was. That's he was.
You guys are fighting to keep the man from listening to you. You're like, he wasn't listening to us? So let me keep going here. The heroin thing too is just hilarious, and it's not hilarious from the standpoint of the tragedy of it. It's hilarious that all of a sudden white people have found out that we got heroin and it kills people. Wow! Welcome to the party. Welcome to the party. The same thing with militarization of police. The rappers, if you listen to rap music like I have over years, they've been telling you what's going on. There's a song called Batarang. Pull it up and listen to it. It talks about the police no longer want to knock your door in with this slow thing. They took this tank and they drove it up through your house. Batarang. That's what we call it in the community. Okay? You guys, they just got caught with this mess in Ferguson. They got caught. They've been this way. Look at what they used to get the Black Panthers. Look at what they used to get the SLA. They came in there and they used heavy weapons. But because it's minorities, blacks, Chicanos, who cares? Look at the shootout at Wounded Knee. You think they were using big, high-powered sniper rifles taking people out? That's 1973. And now people are surprised it's happening in your communities. Like I say, welcome to the party. Let me just say this, and looking at this whole thing, I was in Starbucks about a year or so ago. In walks a police officer in Loudoun County. Now, the Loudoun County crime rate is like, that year, the 3 or 4 murders that happened in our county were by police shooting people. They happened to have a knife. They shot an old lady in a Costco's who was having a diabetic fit, and she had scissors. They came in, they shot so many bullets that they shoot each other, one break and hit the other guy. Okay, so this is Loudoun County. I grew up in St. Louis. I used to party in D.C. on 14th and U Street, where now white people walk the little dogs. Yeah. The only white person we used to see on 14th and U back in the day was the cops. Now, and you didn't see a whole lot of them. Go to Ben's Chili Bowl. Last time I went to Ben's Chili Bowl, I'm like, where all these white people come from? They're gone. But this is what I'm saying. These were rough neighborhoods, and this guy's out in Loudoun County, and he's got on more gear than I had when we crossed the line of departure in 1991 going into Iraq. He had on more gear. And I'm looking at this guy, he's got on more stuff than Batman. I'm like, what's that? What's going on? This My uncle was an officer for 30 years in St. Louis. He was on the bad boy squad. The guys that went out and got the worst of the worst criminals, the big cases that like a white girl gets killed in the city of St. Louis. You got to solve that one. Get in there and find this guy, kick in, do whatever you got to do. And he wore a pistol, maybe a little something here, maybe a brass knuckles. That was it. And they copped. They copped all day, every day. When the St. Louis, before the drug war started, was the most dangerous city in America. Murder rate was a dangerous city. They copped. And they didn't need all this equipment. They didn't need all this. So my point being, I'm an environmental lawyer, and when you want the government's money to do a project, you got to do a NEPA document, National Environmental Policy Act document, which requires you to tell how this project is going to help human health or the environment. And you got to go through a lot of blah, 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 a lot of litigation. Why don't they require something like that when you were just talking about up in New Hampshire, we need this battery, we need this MRAP. What is your analysis? What is your analysis based on? This is the problem with all this equipment. There's no threat analysis of what you're going to use this equipment for. Now, if you're going to do an environmental project, you've got to do analysis. You're going to do something, you got to do analysis. If you're going to get a mine-resistant vehicle, what is your analysis of your threat? How often do you think the threat's going to occur? Now, they're going to always throw the worst-case scenario. They're going to throw Dallas in on it. Yep. And I find Dallas it was tragic, but I'm still up here in my head trying to figure out how one guy against 400, he gets that many people. So something's telling me that somebody didn't know shooting school training. If you're going to train your people, train them right. They're shooting school. The sniper starts shooting, you get down, this guy fires, you move. You fire, that guy moves. I don't know what they were doing, and I don't know how that was coming out, but you got all your equipment now. You're going to be the big guy, then train like the big guy. And that's the problem we got with this. We have a lack of training. When I was on an airplane going to Iraq and Afghanistan, my thought was, shoot, I sure hope I don't get shot. I sure hope I don't get blown up. I sure hope I don't get maimed. When I got to Afghanistan, Iraq, and I put on my equipment with my boys, and we locked it up, and my thought was, I wish they would try something today. Bring it. We're going to put it on you. It changes your mentality. It changes your mentality. It changes your whole scope of who I am when you've now got armor, and you've got weapons, and you've got all this equipment. I'm no longer come to talk to you like, hey, man, what's the problem here, man? Between you two, let's just figure it out. It's, I'm the boss, and you're going to do what I say, and if not, I'm bringing it, because I'm a big guy now. I'm a big man. And a lot of these cops are now kind of 5'2". These guys walking around like,
Well, a lot of them are ex-military.
A lot of them ex-military.
Out of a different theater, and they're not trained.
But they should be trained. But even in the military, we are trained better than these police officers on a lot of these various elements, because we know when to shoot and when not to shoot. And when we should shoot, when we should. The thousands and thousands and thousands of troops that we had in Iraq and Afghanistan for as many civilians not to get killed, that tells you there's a lot of discipline in that fire control systems that we put in place. They don't have them they shot an old lady. She was having a diabetic. She was having a problem. She weighed 90 pounds. 2 big 6'2" officers come in there, and they got to put her down. Are you kidding me? We all watch cops. You even these arrests. Everybody in here has watched Cops before, right? Am I right?
No.
You never watched the show Cops. Great show, because they will show you the proper procedure of how to arrest somebody that doesn't want to be arrested. They grab him, they take him to the ground, and they cuff him. Nobody gets shot. Nobody gets killed. All the time they're watching Cops. Nobody's gotten shot, laying on the ground, won't stop. Nobody's got killed in the chase. They chase the guy, they catch him, they cuff him, they stuff him. That's procedures. All that's procedures. So what I'm saying is that the weaponry that they're getting is not tied to procedures. The reason why you're seeing so many people killed now is because they teach center mass shooting, which is what we teach in the military. We teach you shoot here, so if your bullet deviates, it'll hit here, 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 or here.
Just a quick question on that. What's the theory behind? What I've heard is if you're to pull your weapon, then you should be putting somebody down. That's a mentality that has been changed over time when this weaponry, because the weaponry now is more severe. The bullets are more. A 38, you can get hit by a 38 and live, but you get hit
hit by these 9mm spinning rounds, these tumbling bullets that hit you here and come out here, you're not going to live.
Yeah,
You're not going to live.
what's happened is that a couple of things. When the police department use of force policies were not updated as the equipment changed. And so you see some things like if you want to go to school on use of force policies, a good place to start is the website for the Ad hoc Police Review Commission in Fairfax. Now, I don't like where they've come out on some things, but the documentation that's available for you to review, the stuff that the use of force committee looked at, is good. And the use of force policy that they're coming up with does shift the focus from using the force to protecting life, both the life of the officer and the life of the person that they're interacting with. And I do think there's some good changes that are coming there. Where the recommendations are falling down has to do with civilian oversight. And I think that's the other piece of all of this, which is all of these changes are taking place outside of our conversation. So whether they're a haircut or not, we didn't make that decision. The sheriff did, or the police chief did. And sometimes because they're using asset forfeiture dollars, they're not even going through the normal budget cycle. And so as a consequence, they're completely outside of civilian authority. And if you go back to your military experience, my dad was in the service for 39 years. He was the head of the Army Material Command. That meant they developed all the R&D and all the military equipment. They didn't get to start that project without congressional authority. They didn't get to buy the equipment once it was developed without congressional authority. And they didn't get to deploy the equipment without a forces agreement or rules of engagement that determines when you can shoot and when you can't, which had to go up through the civilian chain of command to the civilian secretaries of the Army and that kind of thing. We don't have any structure like that with respect to these now quasi-military, paramilitary forces that are in our communities. They're operating completely outside of civilian.
But it doesn't. The force use does not allow discretion by the officers the way it's designed now. There may be a situation where an officer says, I could probably shoot this guy in the leg and stop this. But his policies are, if I pull a weapon, it's like there's a group of religious groups that they carry knives. They pull a knife, they got to draw blood. If I pull a weapon, I got to go send a mask to bring this guy down. I can't shoot him in the leg. And this is ridiculous because you watch, go back and pull this film up of when they were capturing the Muslim guy that did attacks in Paris. They were hunting him down in Belgium. There's heavily armed, about 6 guys in standard tactical formation with all of the automatic weapons coming up on the building. The guy peers out of the building and comes running out the building. They had one guy that was a designated shooter. They knew that they'd been trained in that circumstance. He shot him in the leg and then took the guy away. He shot him in the leg. In America, he got 50 bullets. It would have been 50 bullets. But what I'm saying is that this is what you, as advocates or people that are concerned about this is where you have to start to of course, all the shootings in Michael Brown, all these shootings are justified. Of course they are. Look at what your rule you're dealing with. If these people have taken the rules and said, if I got my toys, I'm going to use them. That's where stand your ground comes from. If I got a gun, if I get to carry a gun, I should be able to shoot somebody, right? So I can't really shoot somebody under the old standards of the castle doctrine or retreat or try to get out. I've got to come up with this. I was inherently scared of this guy. That's a good reason to shoot somebody. He's black. I'll shoot him. And he scared me. That's what's standing your ground. If you're going to have a toy, you got to justify using it, which is utterly ridiculous. The United States had nuclear weapons. We fired off nuclear weapons in 1945. Since then, we have not had a use of nuclear weapons because somebody's smart enough to understand that we need to have procedures and policies to pop this big bomb off. And that's where we don't have, and that's where youth advocates have to get in there and advocate. Look at your use of force for your police force and ask them for the use of force, and you'll see these use of force things are not designed to deal with every circumstance. They're designed to shoot first, ask questions later, and we'll justify it. And that's why you have people that are getting killed out here, and nobody's being held accountable because the standards they're judging them by are not valid standards for the use of force when you're not protecting human life and property. It's just, if this gun comes out and I got a reasonable, and this is really interesting because I did a case, I defended a case in Prince George's County last year. A kid got shot, and it was just a whole host of circumstances on why my client got shot. And the cop actually shot him through the windshield, fired a bullet through. That's the only thing to save him. The bullet hit the windshield, dissipated the energy, hit him in the neck, and he lived. But when I first got the case, I go, "Shoo, you're gonna give me a Porsche. This is a big one here. This has Porsche written all over it." We started getting into the case, and my Porsche went to a bicycle because once you start looking at the facts and circumstances of what happened, it was reasonable under the law. It was reasonable for this guy to shoot my guy based on the information that he was getting. I could went to court. We could have fought over some minor possibilities, but it was reasonable for him to use force based on the rules for which society has decided to judge. When these officers get these guns and they're operating under these rules, society has said.
It's not society, it's a court.
No, well, courts, whatever. Society has said you can use these weapons under these. It's society because society hasn't jumped up and said,
Exactly.
hey, people are getting killed by these guns. Maybe we need to pass some legislation which changes the use of force. All the legislations on the side of police officers, from immunity to suing them to getting after them, all these things are on their side. Hate crime, all this stuff is on their side. Nothing is on your side as far as was it reasonable for this guy to pull the trigger and shoot?
When you think about it, I mean, I have to sort of take a deep breath anytime somebody talks to me about blue lives matter. Because in Virginia, the only status-based offense for which you can get capital punishment is if you shoot a law enforcement officer. There's no aggravated circumstances. There's nothing other than you knew and willfully acted to kill a person, a law enforcement officer, in sort of an extended public safety kind of thing. That is a status-based qualification for capital murder. There isn't a single other status you can have that automatically results in the ability to charge capital.
Pregnant woman,
No, but
children.
that's two lives.
No, but I'm saying pregnant woman, children, nothing.
So,
Kill
pregnant
a cop.
woman, yes, because it's presumed to be
Kill a
two
cop,
lives.
you're going
but it's
down.
two lives.
I also
The other one we do is assault, which is built into our hate crime statute, because we don't have a freestanding hate crime statute in Virginia. We have an appreciation of penalty statute. So if I assault Roy because I don't like people with beard, I don't like his religion, or I don't like his race, and I don't injure him, then the ordinary assault, I get convicted of that, and I get a mandatory minimum sentence. It's a misdemeanor, and I get a mandatory minimum of 30 days in jail. If I prove that the intent to harm him because of his religion, his race, okay. If I hurt him, that's without hurting him. It's a misdemeanor, and I get. If I maim him or injure him or seriously injure him in some way, it's a felony, but it's the same mandatory minimum, 30 days.
Wow.
If the person is a law enforcement person, and it's a big list because it's not just police officers, it's EMTs, it's firefighters, it's correctional officials, it's everybody who ever wears any kind of uniform that has some kind of authority, it is an automatic felony, even if nobody's injured. It's a mandatory 6 months in jail or prison. So we have said in Virginia law, police lives are more important and more valuable than our lives because we have created punishments that are more extreme for the behavior exhibit the same exact behavior. If the police officer assaults Phillip because he's black, it's a misdemeanor if he doesn't hurt him, right? And if it's under colored law, it's probably not a crime at all. But
it's not a crime at all.
So but even if he was off duty, an off-duty police officer could assault you. So we have clearly said in our criminal laws, without a doubt. So now I've got Dickie Bell, who is a delegate from the Valley, who has introduced because he wants Virginia to be like Louisiana, a quote hate crimes amendment to include law enforcement officers in our hate crimes law. And what his proposal does is we do have a reporting statute where local police are required to report to the state police crimes that are involved the intent to hurt somebody because of their status. And so he wants to add the law enforcement guys to that. And I'm going, there isn't a single law enforcement person who's ever been injured under any of these statutes, which we all already know about. So the idea we need a reporting statute's a little bit weird. But they're making it up to be this huge Blue Lives Matter thing, as if in Virginia we're not already saying Blue Lives Matter a lot. So
It seems to me that the conditions that we're describing are conditions that create the need for revolution.
Well, they create the need for civic. They do create the need for a fundamental change in the way the community interacts with police. And let me just say, we are partly responsible for this as taxpayers.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the biggest issues in Ferguson was that taxpayers were unwilling to pay taxes to pay for fundamental services of government, which include public safety. And they told their police they had to go out and earn the money to run the department. And we are doing that in Virginia. We have a fee-based criminal justice system. We are increasing our fees on people in the system and the tax on users all the time because we're not willing to pay general tax revenues for the public safety we demand. And when you build fee-for-service incentives, whether it's civil asset forfeiture or something else, you buy and pay for a police force that ultimately becomes predatory.
And so that's why we are discovering that there are debtor prisons.
Right.
We have debtor
That's what
prisons.
Ferguson was.
Yeah, and
Basically,
Ferguson
town of
actually,
Ferguson was the debtor.
the sheriff of
All the
Hanover.
towns in North County, St. Louis.
Right. The sheriff in Hanover read the Ferguson report, not the one on the Michael Brown killing itself, but the more generic report, and said at a public meeting that if he were a law enforcement person, looking at that from a perspective of should somebody be prosecuted, he would be looking at a civil RICO lawsuit against the entire force and others racketeering because what he saw was an intentional racket to deprive people of their civil rights in order to make money.
But it goes higher than
Well, that's-
it goes
that's-
higher
It's
than
not just the law
yeah, but it goes
enforcement.
higher than St. Louis. I mean, the system, it's the system set up in St. Louis
Right.
when they split St. Louis County from St. Louis City and put these little municipalities. Then they start gentrification and they took all the black people and put them on North St. Louis in these little small towns and now have these yard social service networks with no money. And that's essentially they set everybody up and then people went to their most crass ways of dealing with things. Let's screw little man. And that's what happened.
Let me ask Adam if he has something he wants to add, and then we'll open it back up to more questions.
Sure, I would also say that you're not going to get libertarians here, not talking about drug legalization. One of the problems, I think, is how much, speaking of money, where does money comes from, and money for enforcement and money for incarceration. We are the only country on earth with this fetish for throwing people in cages that we're mad at. We incarcerate hundreds of thousands of people for nonviolent drug offenses. Not only does drug criminality, drug prohibition cause drug crime, obviously, it also causes violent crime. If you go back to 1930s Chicago and look at the crime rate, the violent crime rate, the crime rate against police officers, it was through the roof. Because in 2016, if two alcohol distributors have a dispute, they settle it in court with lawyers. In 1929, they settled it on the street corner with Tommy guns and Molotov cocktails, because that's what prohibition does. That's how disputes get settled in a black market as opposed to a free market. So one aspect that I, of course, advocate for when it comes to addressing police militarization, when it comes to addressing the cost of mass incarceration, is to end the drug war and to legalize drugs and to have policing actual crimes, rape, murder, theft, things of that nature. And that's not, it's hard. I think a lot of people are on board with like marijuana legalization now, but one thing I would ask as a favor to me is to start thinking about the legalization of other drugs that most people are afraid to say we should legalize. Drugs like heroin, drugs like crack. Start thinking about whether the criminal justice system is equipped for this at all, or how much of the militarization problem it can be traced back to prohibition.
You want to lose one political party, lose a political party because their whole political platform is built on fear.
If I say legalize heroin, I lose both political.
Yeah, to an extent, yeah.
Well, There's a difference between legalization and decriminalization. So,
Right.
we could create a mechanism in which we don't criminalize, addictive behavior. in order to be able to-
But they're starting to do that now because little white
I
kids in the suburbs are now starting to become heroin addicts.
Here's the dark corollary of that. They also are recommending that if I hand you a pill and you die, I become a murderer.
Oh, hell yeah.
Even though you voluntarily made the choice. And so good people who I usually think highly of are arguing that a solution to the heroin problem, because it involves their children, is that we should make everybody who gives somebody a drug a murderer if somebody overdoses as a result of ingesting that drug. That's not the right response.
That would get rid of a lot of doctors.
Well, and the other thing that people aren't paying attention to with respect to this drug stuff is, it's something that the Oregon ACLU has gone after, and something that I keep sort of having in the back of my mind is, y'all are in this big prescription drug database inside, and if you get certain kinds of drugs, the law enforcement guys can walk into a little CVS and find out a lot about you that you didn't know was public information to the government. And it's all about, being able to track and trace overprescription and all of this stuff. And it really is a huge compromise of our privacy that nobody's taking.
In some cases, posing as medical board examiners, like the DEA has been caught going into pharmacies, going into doctors' offices, like with somebody from the board of medical examiners with them, just standing there not saying anything, and then saying, we'd like the access to this patient's records, which normally would require a warrant, but because the doctor thinks this is the board of medical examiners, they're voluntarily turning over the records to the federal government, and DEA is finding out whether you have opioid prescriptions, whether this doctor is giving more prescriptions than the government wants them to, and it's, certainly the medical community is well aware of this and kind of operating in fear right now of
so these, I think the things that we're sort of highlighting is the interconnectedness of all of this. So, the government surveillance and privacy that they're talking about down the hall is related, the lack of liberty and the increasing compromise of our privacy is related to the militarization of our police, is related to the criminalization of communities of color and people who have addictions.
It all comes back to profit. It all comes back to profit.
It all does.
We talked about that earlier. We don't make cars. We don't make this. We lock people up, and people make a lot of money.
It makes Dwight David Eisenhower precious.
Look at just the phone call scheme they got. If your kid gets locked, my kid got locked up down here in Richmond for having too good a time, and with a call me, and I had to put $25 in. We talked about 3 minutes, and next thing I know, put some more money, and I'm like, what the heck is this? I got my car and got him out. It's like
it's a racket.
It's a racket, but it's what's happening to that nobody cares about. Who cares about the prisoners? Who cares about that?
All lost
You've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the people who are making, that aren't in this room necessarily, the people who are making these laws that we either kind of bend, whatever, don't represent people in this room. And that's the thing I keep, your local elections, the people who affect your lives, so whether it's in your community or whether it's in the General Assembly. These are people who decide, and if they want to suddenly make it a murder because you gave somebody a pill, we need to pay attention to that, I think, too.
You need to pay attention.
I agree with you.
Exactly.
Say that again, say it louder.
You need to pay attention to redistricting. You've got a Democratic governor, Democratic senators, statewide. Barack Obama carried the state twice, and you've got a zillion Republicans elected.
And not
in
only
safe
in this,
safe districts.
it's all, they're working on redistricting, I guess, because you have to take it to court to do it.
But you need to pay attention to it, because that's where the battle's lost. Once that redistricting occurs, you can't get this gentleman that you talk about, you can't get him out of office.
Right.
So these clowns show up every year and do what they do.
I know only 12, but I'm just saying that it's something that, whether
But I
it's
mean,
redistricting, or you have to have people who are elected, I think, who represent their constituency, which is not true.
Here's what's sad. The sad reality is that they can say to me when I go talk to them about these issues, I am representing my constituents, because the only people they hear from are the parents of the girl who overdosed, who believe that the person ought to be charged with murder and prosecuted. They're not hearing from the people who represent.
That's what I'm
other
saying.
folks.
That's
I'm
absolutely
not
right.
saying that. Exactly.
Gentleman has, you know,
Yeah.
I want to bring up something and clearly confirm this. She was talking about the Blue Lives Matter law that makes it a hate crime. Every year at the General Assembly, they bring up a bill to expand that category. First it's police, then it's sheriff's deputies, and firefighters, and volunteer rescue squad people, and civil defense people, and every year the General Assembly of Virginia makes the laws. Every law has to go in front of two committees, at least two, one in the House, one in the Senate. And in those committees, it will have at least one and probably several hearings. Now, how many people in this room are retired? All right, I venture to suggest that you should find the time to spend some time down at the General Assembly. This is something that I've been doing on a volunteer basis since 1972. I ain't the most effective lobbyist in the world, but I'm persistent as shit.
Here's a good one. Tell them what time they usually hold these controversial hearings.
Oh, well, they are they far better than it used to be. Now you can log on and find out, because they're required to give public notice. Of course, that public notice might be 5 minutes before the meeting.
At 6 o'clock in the morning.
But I think, Brian,
Yes.
I think your point is well taken, but I would say that if you wait till General Assembly session, you've lost the battle.
You're right. You're absolutely
Any one of
right.
you at any time can go see your delegate or your senator and have a conversation with them about the things that matter to you. And
You
you
can-
shouldn't wait until January or February to do it.
Absolutely, and write letters. Every letter that they get, they figure there's at least 100 more people that feel that way and don't bother to write away.
Right, exactly.
Every phone call they get, they figure there's at least 10 people that feel that way.
From someone in their district. They will cancel out anybody who's not from their
Yes,
district.
and my main cause has been criminal justice system in general, but drug laws in particular. And over again, I hear, Mr. Sherry, you're absolutely right. What we're doing is stupid. But if I did that, the folks back home would have my hide. And they say that because that's the kind of letters they get. The people who know the truth about the war on some drugs and some drug users, they're scared to write letters. They're afraid it would get them on somebody's watch list. I don't think that's a realistic fear, but I've been in their face about it
Right.
for 5 years, and outside of a period when I have every reason to believe they were tapping my phone. But if you know about it, that helps, because you can feed them false information.
Mr. Hill?
I just wanted to mention another aspect of militarization of the police, and that is not so much the weapons, but the mentality and the tactics. Key parts of class. And you all alluded to a little bit, but I was wondering if you had any ideas about how we might go about getting police departments. Go back to the idea of community police.
Well, you have to be talk about the threats. What's your assessment? What is your threat? When we go and fight our wars, we try to figure out use things on intelligence, military intelligence, which is kind of the opposite. But we try to figure out who are we up against? What's my enemy? What's his disposition? What is he doing? What are you against? I'm still trying to figure out what the hell they're out against a non-encounter. What is the threat that has you this gear. Are you kidding? It's Loudoun County. It's
Half the email traffic in the world goes through there.
that's it. You know, the only threat out there is how many babies they're gonna have, how many kids we get in our schools. We get 2,000, almost 3,000 kids, new students every year. Are the builders gonna build us into oblivion? What are the cops doing? And that's what I'm saying about threat assessments. What is your real threat assessment here? I understand the streets of Baltimore. I understand. I'll be honest with you. When I've got property in the city of St. Louis, when I go home to the city of St. Louis, the second I talk about going to see my property, I bring a weapon. Okay, I bring a weapon because I know the threat assessment down there. My brother's he's been hit 3 or 4 times doing construction work down there. It's a threat. Okay, what is your threat assessment? You know, what are you assessing to be able to have this equipment in New Hampshire? I understand in certain inner cities you might want to be a little bit more heavy on. You might want to have a little bit different tactics when you deal with circumstances. But the county?
Well, to riff on that point, I think I talked a little bit, about the situation in Keene, New Hampshire, but about especially the fact that it's not their money. I think the federalization is an important thing here because when you adopt the federal stuff comes with strings attached, right? You have to adopt the mentality of the war on terror. The world's battlefield. Terrorists can strike at any moment. Drug cartels are among us. They're taking over society. If you end the federal programs and law enforcement becomes a community-funded, community-overseen process again, the police department in Keene, New Hampshire, the city of Keene, New Hampshire is not going to buy them a Bearcat. They won't have the equipment. They won't get the middle. Now the NYPD, they will buy equipment for the NYPD. But you have the federal government handing this stuff out all over America in exchange for the SWIT and that mentality. So you have to. There's no way to have this federal Christmas every day and then not have the mentality.
But it's not just federal because in Virginia, we were part of a multi-state Medicaid fraud investigation of a drug company that was producing a drug that was being administered to people in nursing homes that was not demonstrated to be effective for the reason that was being administered. So there was a Medicaid fraud settlement. AGs across the country were involved. Our Attorney General was involved in Virginia. And the settlement amount for Virginia was $100 million. Not 1 cent of that settlement went back to the people who were injured by having the drug administered to them that was not effective. The courts approved at the Attorney General's requests a mechanism in which the Attorneys General decided where the money went. And where the money went, because it was in the nature of an asset forfeiture, right? So it was an asset forfeiture after a criminal prosecution and somebody was found guilty. I don't have any problem with disgorging profits of the criminal activity at that point, because that's what they were doing. But they took that $100 million and they handed it out just like the 1033 program. They handed it out to only the law enforcement agencies. It's how Chesterfield County got a stingray. They bought it with that settlement money. The Attorney General made the decision about where it was going without anybody getting to tell him what to do. And it wasn't, and that was true when I was in the Attorney General's office. We did these kinds of settlements all the time, and we sent money to some hospital for HIV, related work, or we did something. But this was the biggest settlement, other than the tobacco settlement, that I've ever seen an AG's office get, freestanding. And Ken Cuccione was the Attorney General, but Mark Herring continued the program and went around the state, pictures being taken of the people who bought, military-style equipment with this money.
That's a big problem.
So it's not. I agree with Adam. I think if we got rid of the federalization and the free stuff, that would be great. But I think we also have to send a message about civil asset
forfeiture, free stuff.
And this is the part where I have to do the mea culpa, because Virginia had a constitution that said that all fines and forfeitures go to the literary fund. The literary fund funds schools and library construction exclusively. And so any fines, forfeitures, or escheats or leftover money, they all went to the literary fund until the war on drugs, when I was in the Attorney General's office working for a Democratic Attorney General. And we went around the state and advocated for changing the Virginia Constitution to allow our local law enforcement to have the benefit of asset forfeitures that were done in the context of the drug drug investigations. Because, that helps the war on drugs. Now, it's one thing to say that the Lamborghini the drug dealer is driving around in should be forfeited after you convict him. But what happens with civil asset forfeiture is you don't need a conviction. You don't never prove anybody's guilty. You grab the Lamborghini, and then you begin a civil action called Commonwealth versus Lamborghini. It's an in rem action against the property. And if the property can't prove that it wasn't used in a crime, then that gets forfeited. And under this constitutional amendment, it can go to the local police department, which creates this incentive-based policing. So in Fairfax County, the police show up in their SWAT unit with their stuff at a poker game. There's $60,000 on the table. They grab up the $60,000 and they tell the people, "We're not going to prosecute you, but we're going to keep the money." And they ended up keeping $30,000, getting $30,000 back.
It doesn't have to be like $80. It
Right.
can be $50 in somebody's pocket on the street corner. And, yeah.
Right. And so when you listen to our state police talk about the fact that on the interstates in Virginia they seize more drugs than anybody else in America, they're also seizing a lot of cash. And in many of those cases, they don't have any way of proving the cash was involved in a criminal act, because the person's just driving through Virginia. And so when it came time to change the law in Virginia to say that police could not get the benefit of civil asset forfeiture unless there had been a conviction first, and then you're forfeiting what was clearly used in a crime, the state police got up and said, "Oh, but we had $350,000 in the budget that we've already essentially spent because we know we're going to get these assets."
They're budgeting for what they're going to see over the next year.
So that's another thing that we have to work on to try to change is the mentality that that's okay. And what the prosecutor said when we were talking about it is clear. These people are guilty. We just need another way to get them. A liberal prosecutor from Arlington County said that to me. So you theoretically is supposed to be one of the good persons.
So what do you?
Sorry.
Saying these were evil.
Yeah.
Anybody, these people, somebody they think is a drug dealer. Somebody they
Anybody
know
who's got
is.
stuff that
Yeah.
they say.
But the prosecutor of the police, just the prosecutors of police believe they're bad people, and they know that they can't prove that they were guilty of a crime. But if they can seize their property and forfeit it, then maybe they can put them out of business. And they don't want to have to be put to the point of proving beyond reasonable doubt they were criminals. They can take their profits on a preponderance of the evidence, which is a much lower standard. Without a crime.
Yeah,
But that's not
In their budget.
Here and then back to back.
I want to go
Yeah.
back to this conversation about relationships between the community and police.
Right.
I think we're sort of, I feel fairly disempowered when it comes to asset forfeiture and all that, right? But it seems as if through the lens of Ferguson on down, Black Lives Matter, et cetera, that we're in a place where these conversations are starting to happen, right? And at least there's some chance of being able to shift. And so, my ears perked up around use of force, right? When we're engaged in what do you want policing to look like in your community, maybe that's one place to.
Here's the problem.
We're handing out an action piece for you too.
These cops right here don't live in that community.
Of course not.
The guy that shot Michael Brown, he lived across town in South St. Louis, which is predominantly white. They had a house with a pool, two-car garage, who rode in, copped, took his money, and went out. These cops don't live in that community. So what you talk about community policing, how do you go to community police when you don't have, you're just riding there to keep your thumb on these jokers, and then I'm going back home and live in my community.
We're passing out a little action sheet that has some specific things in it, and what we're trying to do in the ACLU Virginia is highlight, what reforms you actually can.
The cops live in the neighborhoods.
But we did a report a year ago on the use of body cams, and we pointed out that body cameras are only an effective tool if the policies that are in place and the training that's in place that goes along with them, will make sense. We're working on, we have a model policy, so people could take those models and go and advocate locally that you ought to have a policy that looks like this. We are, we've done some principles on use of force, which I went around to a list listening to it with the Secretary of Public Safety who's going on policing and the relationships in policing communities, and talked in Virginia Beach and Ashburn, Virginia, and where there were no citizens there, except, I mean, in theory, they would have provided, but they weren't there. And then in Richmond, and then also in Roanoke. And to talk about, strategies for enhancing. One of the dangers is that people talk about community policing, and it means different things to different people. So to some police people, it means broken windows policing, which is not community policing. To other people, it means something that's more along the lines of what I'm sure is in your head, which is how do we make people more of the community than not.
And serve and protect, right?
But-
Look what they went. They went to Ashburn, Virginia,
Police training.
instead of Sterling, Virginia, where most of the Hispanics who have the problem with them. Look what they set the table. Mark Herring got elected by Democrats. He barely won because of the minority. First thing Mark did, he went out and wrote and met with sheriff's deputies. He didn't come to meet the people that elected him. He went out and met with sheriff's deputies. And that's what you talked about, 5 years.
Mark Herring's done 3 statewide tours to talk about police community relations, and he has yet to meet with the citizens group.
Not one.
I had to essentially serve sort of an informal subpoena on him to get a meeting with his office to talk about.
Well, didn't you say
This
you were
most
in
recent listening tour is by the Secretary of Public Safety, who advertised it as being about police community relations, but when you showed up, it was about how were they going to give out $750,000 in some kind of money that they have from the federal government, and the police were there to make pleas for how it should be spent. But the audiences were very different depending on, in some respects, the access to the media. So in Richmond, where they put out a press release saying it was about police community relations, a lot of community people showed up, and the public comment period was about these kinds of issues.
Right.
In Virginia Beach, similarly, there were a group of pastors there were a bunch of community people. In Northern Virginia, where it's impossible to penetrate the media, unless you do one-on-one invitations or you're located someplace that somebody can get to without having to have their own vehicle and an hour full of traffic. They knew who would show up in Ashburn at the police training academy, on Route 7 in Loudoun County. Because nobody, the only citizen rep was me and a woman who saw it on our Facebook page.
I saw it. We talked about coming, but I'm like, we elected Terry and Mark to change some things in this state. They have not done squat. Now, Terry's not going to be reelected because he's going off. But if Mark Herring thinks he's going to go through a campaign without being called on this, he's joking. I'm his local NAACP guy, and I will hound him till he can't see me. He doesn't want to see me ever again because he has failed the system. We got prisoners dying in jails. He's washing his hands, looking the other way. Well, the Fed, somebody else. We got people that have been tased to death in this state. And this guy, as Attorney General, hasn't done nothing. He always excuse, well, they set up who said the office set up and was taking time from me. You come in and you say, what was the first thing you went and did?
Cuccinelli is a more aggressive advocate for criminal law reform as a part of Right on
Exactly.
than Mark Herring has been as Attorney General in Virginia. So, I think I think systemically we have lots of things to talk about. We talked about, the militarization. We want to have people talking to local governments and saying, we don't think you should allow folks to buy drones, tanks, M16s, or acquire them for these programs without you, elected officials, signing off on it. We want citizens to be engaged in the conversation about what our use of force policy should look like. We want citizens to be engaged in the conversation about whether we should have body cams or not. Arlington and Alexandria have decided they're not going to get body cams because from their perspective it's not cost effective. In Ashburn, the Arlington County Police Chief got up and said we have X number of 120 some odd thousand contacts a year with citizens. We've had 50 complaints. We looked at the numbers and it's not cost effective for us to put body cams on people because we don't think it's going to have a meaningful impact. Well, that may or may not be true in that community, but they arrest 8 times more black people in Arlington for drug crimes than white people, and the statewide average is 3.
That's something that the NAACP people have encounters with police officers, especially minorities. And I hear it all the time, man, the police did this, they did this, and file a complaint. No. Well, what am I going to base my argument on if you don't file? If the thing we need to start doing is pushing our citizens to file complaints, to drown them in paperwork, because then lawyers like me and them, when we go in and look at cases, and we got an officer, we got a pattern, then we can do what we need to do.
Download our app for that.
Right.
We have an app called Move Justice Virginia. It's available on both iTunes and Google Play. And it will allow you to record police interactions, and that video goes automatically to our servers. So even if the police sees your phone, we have the video. So, like I said, you can go to our website and find the links there, aclutpa.org, or you can go to Google Play or iTunes and get it there.
But
Make sure you get the Virginia
as
one.
community advocates, you've got to push people to file complaints. Even if it's minor stuff, nothing occurs, because if that cop has 8 or 9 complaints when he does something bad, now we've got a pattern that we've got a bad cop here, and we can help get this guy.
The problem is that if the individual who is filing a complaint, I think the individual does that is feeling separate from the community in which that unless the community is fully behind him or her, you can't do it as a lone individual.
You have to.
And that's.
You have to. You have to file your complaint.
But you can't.
You're saying something different, though. There's two
You
people.
have to have the support of some sort of group or common community behind you in order to have the individual strength. to follow the
Especially
complaint.
communities.
But it's just like voting. If you vote, and we have problems, if you vote, it's an individual thing. The problem that we have to do is we have to make this a national campaign. And we're working on this. There's several organizations called Paper Them Up,
But the
whatever.
difference in voting, I am voting anonymously.
Right.
And filing the complaint, I am.
Well, and here's something else to think about. This is something that we're going to be working on, and something I talked about in Ashburn, actually, and in Virginia Beach. In Virginia, we have police agencies that are non-accredited. So there are these national accrediting bodies, and there's a statewide accreditation program. We have no law that requires the agencies to be accredited. Now, accreditation, as Adam will tell you, because he's done a brilliant piece that looks at the linkages between accreditation and police misconduct, accreditation is not a solution. It's a start, because accredited agencies have police misconduct problems just like non-accredited agencies. But more importantly, we have a law in Virginia that says if you have a license to police, because we do require police officers to be certified, and we require them to do training, there's mandatory training that they're required to do in order to keep their certification. The only other way they can lose their certification, besides not doing the training, is to be convicted of a felony or certain specific misdemeanors. Convicted. What did Warren's data say about how many people get convicted and charged?
Never.
So the guy that violates the use of force policy 5 times or has 15 found misconduct complaints filed against him can be fired. And then he can walk across the line from Loudoun to Fairfax and get hired the next day. Because he still has his Virginia, or she has her Virginia license to police. And she can go across state lines and say, I'm still certified in Virginia. And this is a national problem with our passing bad police along, but it's a state problem as well. And so we're going to be trying to address that. I will tell you, the law enforcement line people, the FOP and the people at the PACs who support candidates, they're inalterably opposed to the change. They tried to do the change in 2012.
The FOP,
The FOP.
but not all the G's.
No, the brass is fine with it.
Right.
But the brass won't get out in front of it because the line people don't like it. So, it's going to take all of us to be really strong as advocates, because in 2012, when the Crime Commission looked at this issue, all they could get in terms of an expansion was an expansion from felony convictions to certain misdemeanor convictions. But they could not get the expansion to founded misconduct. So it is, but it's huge.
Because it's the 21st century policing conversation.
But if we also, the other thing,
Bring that.
citizens, we have to be conscious of is we have to be willing to pay police professional salaries if we want them to act like professionals. Let me ask the lady in the back row who's had her hand up longer than you, Roy.
Of course.
You mentioned Citizens Police Academy, and I happen to be from Chesterfield County, and I did the Citizens Police Academy, which was very informative. And I have lived all across the country, and I've never found a police department that is willing to support and help their community as Chesterfield Police. And I have lived in some sketchy places in Chesterfield. But as to finding it, I know Richmond has a program like that. If you Google Police Academy, you'll find one at least within 25 to 50 miles anywhere you live, and they are excellent for learning and excellent for us.
My experience with them is a little different from yours. My experience is that they are indoctrination programs to develop these boosters, and then they then deploy those boosters anytime somebody criticizes the department.
Well, then I like boosters. What can I say?
Yeah, and I'm not, I just think it's really, I think you can learn a lot, and I'm not saying don't do it,
It depends
but
on
I
what
think
your
you have to
mentality
be,
is.
you have to be careful that you're not.
I did it too. I thought it was great because I learned a lot about what was going on. The only downfall was I got a ticket to get on the phone.
And just because everybody has a story, my husband bought a car from a guy that from a guy who'd been driving it for 9 years, and the guy that had been driving it for 9 years doesn't have a Hispanic surname, but my husband does. And the first day he drove it in Chesterfield County, after he got it, he got stopped for a tinted window violation. And when we went to court, the only other person in there with the same officer was an African American guy with a pickup truck. With a tinted window, but there weren't any blue-haired ladies with Mercedes with tinted windows in their Mercedes. So, and the first words out of the Chesterfield County police officer's mouth when he told my husband ever were, "How long have you been in this country?"
Whoa.
I don't know how many people were downstairs
Yeah, we need to move to,
originally, but somebody was talking about writing a letter to the editor,
Right,
and
yeah.
she got deaf. So it's not as easy. You have to know you have to do it. But one last thing.
Right.
When our hearing runs, I'm more than certain that Ken Cuccinelli is available to run for Attorney General.
Well, I mean, the reality is that we're working closely with Hannah on Fourth Amendment restoration and a bunch of things. Militarization of police, the next round of it is going to be in 305. What's going to be in this room next is government surveillance and the threat to our privacy. And the color of terror and psychology of hate is downstairs in the Alcines or the big room. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.